Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Minds, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com. You can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Altar Sleeve. Support the show by using the code MAGICMICS at checkout for 5% off anything in the store. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys, welcome back. It's the best day ever. It's Crab Day.
Yay!
It is Crab Day.
It is Crab Day.
Pinch, we
sure.
pinch. And Ruben Bressler.
Yes. We're moving sideways into this list.
We are 100% doing that. We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent and let us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Streets of New Capenna cards. Ruben?
Yeah, well, before we get into our sea animals, we're going to talk about a card that makes you don't see animals. Timuljan wrote, the one card that you forgot about would be Witness Protection. Just the flavor of alone could have pushed it into any of the 3 top 10 lists. And with a mana cost of only 1 blue mana, it may just be playable in mono blue, due to it being the closest thing to removal blue will ever get at a competitive cost.
Witness Protection is a common from Streets of New Capenna. It's 1 blue mana for an enchantment aura that has enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a green and white citizen creature with base power and toughness 1/1 named Legitimate Business Person, which is just
incredible.
Just incredible.
The fact that it changes the name to Legitimate Business Person pushes it over the edge. It's so good. Yeah, I mean, it's 1 blue mana, turn off your Gristlebrand, turn off your Emrakul. You know, this thing can shut things down. If you don't mind them having a 1/1 that will ping you and attack your planeswalkers and pick up equipment and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, 1 blue mana is as cheap as it's going to get.
Blue, hands down, has the best flavor in names and abilities in the set. Not even close.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, this is so look. What I would love to see or to know is to be the fly on the wall. You know, let's say a year ago, let's say 9 months ago, there had to be, there has to be meetings where the arena team sits down and says, we're going to do these animations for these cards or whatever. And, you know, I just hope somebody just went to the paint and said, can we please do something cool and special for the Legitimate Business Person? The reason we don't have a live show this week is because the preview show is tomorrow, hype. And, you know, all of us are going to be streaming here. And Engineer Girl's going to be on her channel. It's going to be great. And so, like, when I play this for the first time, I'm just hoping there's something cool associated with it. Just something. Give me something.
I've seen that there's a cool hideaway mechanic with animation with this set.
Oh, nice.
So maybe there'll be something extra cool for the Legitimate Business Person too.
Maybe the Legitimate Business Person's like a possible picture of a guy filing a bankruptcy, notice, paperwork.
Nice.
Or it's just they commissioned someone to change every art in Arena to have a little mask on it. Think that's likely? Do you think that they programmed everything in Arena?
I don't think that's going to work out, but it would be super cute. Congratulations to Timuljan. Please contact us on social media, ideally the DMs to our @MagicMikesCast Twitter for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate, because it's time to talk about the sea creatures, the crabs, the fishies, the serpents, the tortoises, all that stuff. Was there any I missed?
Well, surely there were things you missed. Tortoises and testudinoids are land animals, Evan. You're thinking of sea turtles and other water-based. Yeah.
I went off the list that Evan shared because I kind of wanted us all to have the same pool. But right. I do think we missed jellyfish.
We did.
We did miss jellyfish. That was on me. I was trying, I was literally looking. I was looking through just blue cards. Just show me blue cards so I don't forget a type. And I was like,
right.
That sucked.
I knew that there were some I wanted on my list that weren't on Evan's total, because sea animal can be anything, right? Mm-hmm. There was a brief amount of time I even had Risen Reef on my list, even though that's an elemental. There's a bunch of stuff that can be encompassed in sea animal.
Well, either way, we'll figure out what each other's list consists of, because I got a bunch of hires and a bunch of sames, which is really interesting. So my number 10 is higher on somebody else's list. So Ruben, what is your number 10?
My number 10, I don't know if it's in the group that you sent me, but I knew that this had to be on my list somewhere. These were the original crab people, first name crab, last name people in Magic the Gathering, the most iconic of them. Even though there's an entire creature type called hominids, number 10 is Hominid. Hominid is a 2 generic and a blue for a 2/2 creature hominid from Fallen Empires. Go ahead and use any of the arts. There's 4 of them. Hominid enters the battlefield with a tide counter on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a tide counter on Hominid. As long as there's exactly 1 counter on Hominid, it gets -1/-1. As long as there are exactly 3 on Hominid, it gets +1/+1. Whenever there are 4 or more tide counters on Hominid, remove all of the tide counters from it. So it comes in and goes out with the tide. It's very good. It makes me very happy.
That is very flavorful. It makes me happy as well. This is actually a card I have not seen before, so I'm taking a look at those arts, and they're pretty awesome.
Yeah.
This is the before times, and Lord knows this was the hot, edge of the knife design that we got back in the day. I think there's an easy way to fix this particular sort of design would be to just make them all +1/+1 counters. And you can even have, when it gets 4 counters on it, it resets itself. But, I think today's Magic player would just find it a wonderful joke and probably wouldn't even get it.
And we did 25 years later get Hominid Explorer in Dominaria, just as a little bit of a shout out.
It was nice. And that was a fun card. All right, Nerd Girl, what's number 10?
My number 10 is one of my only higher. I have 2 sames, but they're much later.
Aha. Well, Ruben pulling us through number 10. Let's go here to number 9. This is also higher on somebody else's list, but that's okay because it's dope. Nerd Girl, you got a number 9?
I do, yeah. So my number 9 is a card that I really liked for limited purposes. Now, this is the only one that's a tad bit questionable. There's a lot of water in the picture here, but I feel like it might be partially a land tortoise. I'm not sure. I'm gonna let you guys decide. But Quandrix Cultivator is a pretty sweet turtle druid that we had recently in Strixhaven. This is a 4-mana 3/4 that says when Quandrix Cultivator enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic forest or island card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This card was really, really good. It was actually tough to get through with its big toughness, and getting that extra ramp. It wasn't fixing, unfortunately, because it does require you to have both types of mana to play. But this was big because it did everything Quandrix wanted to do in ramping into these massively large creatures, and overall it was an awesome creature all on its own.
Yeah, card's great.
Card's great.
Definitely fits right into the 2/4/6 mana base that you want to do when you're ramping into your another turtle that may not be on our list, Colossal Sky Turtle, or any of your other giant krakens or leviathans or big green monsters. I guess if you want to cast things that have feet. Who cares about those? But yeah, Quandrix Cultivator, definitely very good. And a lot of water in the art. Can't grow a lot of plants without a lot of water. So I'm on board with this one.
He's a splashy boy. I love this creature and limited. It was great. The Quandrix stuff was sweet. It was card flow, as they like to say. So you're drawing, you're ramping, and this guy's right there with it, and he's huge. Would just stop any big swarm in the early game, which was great, and just ramp you up to let you play 2 cards next turn. It was very nice. All right, Ruben, what's number 9?
Somehow, they've only printed 2 sponges in Magic the Gathering history, and mine comes from my favorite set ever, which is Urza's Legacy. My number 9 is Walking Sponge.
Oh boy.
Walking Sponge is a generic into blue for a 1/1, uncommon from Urza's Legacy, and has the ability of tap, target creature loses flying, first strike, or trample until the end of turn. Loses a keyword. I don't think we see this enough. I would love more of this effect.
Yeah.
Having very specific sniper-like quality of target creature loses something specific that it may not even necessarily have. Something like Phyrexian Splicer, even Amiaboid Changeling is tap, lose part of what you are. Very cool, and I would love to see more of this.
Yeah, Sponge is also a really unique creature type, which is really fun to see. And as a limited player, I get to play with all of these cards. So sometimes the coolest things are, not really accessible to the average Magic player because they just don't get to play a lot of these cards. And so being a massive sea creature fan myself, I love seeing these sorts of abilities and unique creature types.
I think, but definitely unique creature types is great. And the ability to kind of play with the keywords. There was a white enchantment that made a creature gain like defender and lose flying. There was a Wizards got some pushback on, there was a blue instant or an enchant or an aura, I can't remember. Blue is called Pin Down. And it gave it like creature like -6, -0, but they did not lose flying. And you're like, but the things that shows like a fork pinning them down. But either way, I think that creates really interesting gameplay. I can also understand how it'd be like a lot going on, at the time. But I think Wizards is just not caring that much these days about complexity. They're just not. So I could definitely see them, if not reprinting this, putting it maybe in white, for example, I think would be interesting. To let white kind of sort of, say what you can do and when you can do it. Feels very white to me.
Definitely.
Yeah, but that'd be neat. Let's move on here to number 8. And why not? I'll kick it off because this is my first entry into the list and I enjoyed this card. This card also surprised me. It's not expensive, but it's also one of those cards that, it's not expensive for like $3 to $4 or whatever, because it goes in so many decks. And once I kind of learned, as I go through and you sort by ticks and by dollars and by EDH rank and stuff, then I'm go, whoa, why is this card like all the way near the top? And then you realize that Deep Glow Skate just rocks with everything. It just rocks with all the cards. For a blue and 4 generic mana, it's a rare 3/3 fish, and when it enters the battlefield, you double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. That's a lot of words that let you just go bananas. It's like super duper proliferate because it's proliferate, right? So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, except you double.
Double.
That's
is insane.
Double is double. It ain't proliferate when it's double. So.
Put every planeswalker in ultimate range. Yeah. This card's very, very good. I've seen it in a number of commander decks. Most prominently, it sees a bunch of play in like Atraxa and any mono blue, like the 6 mana Teferi. There's a bunch of cards where you want to have, you want to go from 6 to 12 counters on them. Mm-hmm. Even 1 to 2 +1/+1 counters on your entire army is another huge thing to do. And for the low cost of 5 mana, usually 5 mana gets you something like a Muldrifter. But if you already have what you want on the board, this is way better than any amount of card advantage.
Playing this with planeswalkers in play is just absurd. And I figure cards like this are also going to get more and more interesting as we start to experiment with the different abilities and mechanics that Wizards has been doing. We're not really reusing a ton of mechanics anymore. Each set is getting highlight and premier mechanics, where before it felt like we were getting new mechanics, but there was also a lot of like redos or things like that. But this time is like, for the last, 3 years now, every single wedge or guild is getting a new mechanic.
Right.
Yeah.
So now we have people or creatures in Kamigawa that come into play with death touch counters, and then you can destroy artifacts and enchantments with those death touch counters. So getting to double your death touch counters might not just be a nombo. That might actually be relevant, and it's going to get more and more interesting as we get more cards.
It was in fact relevant in one of my Tinker Cube drafts. My opponent proliferated on that stupid turtle and gave him 2 death touch counters and exiled 2 of my artifacts, and I lost because that stupid proliferate. It's a real thing.
Not to mention the fact that we have shield counters now, and being indestructible twice is a big deal.
Big game. Ruben, what's your number 8?
My number 8 has, we'll call it Backbone, since that seems to be what it was called online briefly. The biggest backbone in the history of Magic the Gathering. What a good boy this Leviathan Crab is. Cherix the Raging Isle, or Carix, is a legendary creature, Leviathan Crab, who is a 0/17 creature for 2 generic and 2 blue mana. Spells your opponent's cast that target Cherix the Raging Isle cost 2 more to cast. So almost ward, not quite ward, but almost. Proto ward, let's say. And then pay 3 generic mana, and it gets +X -X until the end of turn, where X is the number of islands that you control. So can very easily become a 5/12 if it needs to be. Oftentimes we'll see fighting stance as an 8/9 or a 9/8, depending on the right circumstances.
Yeah, this card is insane. Its butt is so big that when I saw this, when it was first printed, I just didn't know what to do with it. Like, how do you rate a 0/17? No matter what the text says, it's just where do you even start with this?
Its butt was so big. Sir Mix-a-Lot started in the background, my phone just automatically.
Yeah.
I would say that the promo version of this is way cuter than the standard version. They're both have their cuteness, but I like the promo version a lot better for the bundle. But yeah, where do you go with an 0/17? Y'all, look at that butt. It is so big. Nerd Girl, what's number 8?
All right, so my number 8 is a card that probably should have been an 11th card in the pre-show because it's slightly inappropriate. But oftentimes I like to draw little crabs when I sign cards and send them out to viewers when they win things. So the joke was always that I like to give my viewers crabs. So one day, for Valentine's Day, I decided to send my patrons all a very specific crab card because it was Valentine's Day and I wanted nothing more than to give everybody crabs. So I gave everybody King Crab.
Perfect.
And for the flavor text, which we'll get to in a second, it is a 6 mana 4/5 crab creature that says pay 2, colorless and a blue. To tap, put target green creature on top of its owner's library. But the flavor text is why I chose to send it for Valentine's Day, because it says, I'm allergic to shellfish. Not only did it kill my entire village, it also gave me a nasty rash.
Perfect.
They don't make them like this anymore.
No, they don't.
They just
and
don't.
Also, Urza's Legacy. It makes me very happy.
So, my patrons got this as a beautiful Valentine's Day gift, which was probably very strange, but it made me laugh.
Very good.
6 mana 4/5 in blue. Sure. Activated, somewhat repeatable ability to just bug your opponent and screw up their draw step forever. Yeah, no, we don't do that anymore.
Put your green creature that has Echo on top of your library forever. Yeah, this thing was a beast.
Yeah.
In Urza's Block Limited for sure.
There you go. Let's move in here to number 7. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 was a creature. It has a creature type that I didn't see on Evan's compendium of sea creatures, but I knew that there were going to be some that were missed. But I remembered this creature in particular, and I wanted to include it. The cephalids are people that live underwater. It was a group of people that lived underwater, primarily in Dominaria, but they exist all across the planes of the multiverse. Mm-hmm. And this particular cephalid was the central piece of a combo deck in Legacy for a very long time, and its name is Cephalid Illusionist. Cephalid Illusionist is a generic into blue for a 1/1 Cephalid Wizard. Whenever Cephalid Illusionist becomes the target of a spell or ability, mill 3 cards. And it also has an activated ability of 2 generic and a blue. Tap, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to and dealt by target creature you control this turn. But the real party piece of this card is that first ability. Spell or ability, you then get a copy of Nomad's Encore, which has an activated ability of pay 0, the next damage that would be dealt to this creature is dealt to target creature instead. You mill your entire library, and once you mill your entire library, the world is your oyster, as it were, and you can do any number of things that you want to do. Most commonly, it was get a Sutured Ghoul into play after removing a bunch of other creatures from your library. This also was a piece of the, I believe this was a piece of the Infinite Life deck, where you had Daru Sanctifier as another thing that could happen with the Infinite Life deck. But yeah, you use this with an Encore creature, or a Shuko is another one. Shout out
also,
to Kamigawa.
Flag Bearers, I think, did that too.
Flag Bearers would be able to target this over and over again. Basically, once you put your entire library into your graveyard, you can do whatever the heck you want.
You just shenanigans.
Yeah.
Question mark.
Sea creature shenanigans.
Yeah.
Cephalids are great. They were definitely around when I started playing, and we're seeing them kind of come back with the new Capenna set, which is really exciting. I love cephalids. They're cool. I was super hyped when I saw that.
And if we're going back to Dominaria, then let's go. I actually left them off my list intentionally because I thought maybe they're going to make a whole bunch of cephalids in the future and we'll have a cephalid list.
That's true.
Because there's a bunch of cool cephalids.
There were... Are they members of the Brokers? We got a couple cephalids in this
I think that's right.
There's a black and a blue cephalid.
Okay, so not Brokers.
So I think they're the Obscura.
Obscura,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
There you go. Nerd Girl, what's number 7?
All right. My number 7 is, I wanted to put it on my list, but it's not very competitive. And it's not going to see a lot of play because it's in an unset. But it's adorable and the art is amazing. And I love, how unique the ability is. So we're going to go ahead and talk about a crafty octopus because that's what they are. So crafty octopus is a host creature. And it is a 1/3 for 3 mana. And this is when this creature enters the battlefield. This creature assembles a contraption. And so you get a card off the contraption deck and you get to do a bunch of cool stuff. And the art is amazing and it's adorable. I think he's even wearing glasses. It's kind of hard to see it, but and he's got a bunch of little tinkering toys and tools, which I just absolutely love. And all of the animals in this unset that are like split in half are super cool.
And because it assembles a contraption, it's a rigger, which is also kind of neat and weird, and host creatures, which are super cool. And I hope they bring them into actual black border magic, which would be great. But the illustration is just fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. And this sort of helped tie the room together between several archetypes in Unstable, where, you wanted to have the host augment deck, but you also wanted to have contraptions be playable, and so you were able to sort of have both sides of it in this one card.
So for my number 7 here, this was I guess I should have put it at number 8 because yada yada mana costs and things, but it would have been a lot cooler there. I'm now realizing it doesn't matter. The point is I needed a giant freaky sea monster and I wanted to get a Leviathan, didn't want to get just like the Leviathan. So I was like, you know what, this really cool Leviathan showed up right after Magic 2010 when they kind of rebooted everything, and they said, you know what, let's make a Storm Tide Leviathan, a bluishy blue creature to blue the blues, because it's 3 blue, 5 generic mana. So that's 8 mana for an 8/8. Again, should have been my number 8, but it wasn't. It's a rare Leviathan with Island Walk. Man, been a minute since we've seen Island Walk. I mean, this creature is unblockable as long as defending player controls an island. All lands are islands in addition to the other types, and creatures without flying or Island Walk can't attack. Now, we talk about flavor. We have flavored this card. Salt.
Yeah. Flooded every land. Flooded the plains, flooded the forests.
And the basements.
Flooded the mountains, in fact. Yes, and also the basements. But yeah, 8/8 unblockable for 8. That also means that most of your opponent's creatures can't attack. Sign me up.
It's great.
Yeah, it does. It is very difficult for your opponent to deal with, and or it kind of just shuts down the opponent's game plan as well. So it's doing both sides of the coin, which we don't tend to see a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and I know they've gone away from, Island Walk or whatever, but they did bring it back, one more time for Commander Legends. So
sure.
Let's go Land Walk.
Yeah, they were like, oh no, we don't want to do these old abilities that are flavorful but are complicated. We don't want to do those anymore. And then they're just like, screw it. We're going to bring back phasing. We're going to bring back Island Walk. We're going to bring back protection, right? These super complicated abilities that make sense in a storytelling sense, but not really in a gameplay sense. But this one is like, it tells the story so effectively that Island Walk, like you could teach the ability of Island Walk using this card.
Yeah. Like, the fish turns everything to an island and it can go wherever it wants and nobody else can because it turned into the sea. Yeah. I mean, that's really cool. It's weird. It's wild, honestly, to have seen Magic treat Land Walk as like one of the most overpowered things of all time, to just getting to be like, it's kind of weird and we don't need it. And then they kind of bring it back because it's got some flavor on it. And then they're kind of like, well, we don't really like it anymore. So it comes in and out of favor. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, let's move on here to our number 6. Ruben, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is the only higher that I have on somebody else's list.
Okay, then. Nerd Girl, what's your number 6?
I do have number 6, and it's fantastic. It is one of my favorite creatures printed in the last few years. Not close. I love this card so much. In fact, when my viewers ask me, like, okay, well, a lot of creators have like, that they're Phyrexian or they're fairies or whatever in their bio. They ask me what would I be if I wanted to put something like that in my bio, and my answer is always a shark to crab.
Yeah.
That would be my my creature type if given the choice. Shark to crab is a 4 mana fish, octopus, crab creature type. It is a 4/4 that you can adapt for 4 mana, 2 colorless, and a forest and an island. You can adapt 1, which puts a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Shark to Crab, tap a creature. Its controller doesn't untap it during its next untap step. The art is amazing. I just want a giant print of this. The creature type is awesome, and it's all of the things. It's a fish, octopus, crab. It's amazing.
All in one.
Yeah. I almost put Scuttlegator on my list because I was like, that's 3 creature types that all live in the water. Mm-hmm. And I forgot Shark to Crab exists. So I'm glad this one got on there because it's 3 of the things that we're talking about. So I'm very glad.
Yeah, this is peak Simic. This is Simic going nuts and silly and funny. And I appreciate that. Like, I don't think slapstick is quite the word, but Simic goes right to the line, just right to the line of like complete absurdism of the weird stuff they're doing. And I think that's awesome.
The art is like the tentacles grabbing the guy and everything. It's perfect.
It's so good. So for my number 6, this is a creature that was printed recently. I love it. I know arguably, technically, it could be a land creature, but arguably, technically, it's still a turtle, so screw off. It's my list. I love a giant monster that can also be used in different ways, and Lord knows, none can be sliced and diced quite like the colossal sky turtle. For a blue 2 green 4 generic mana, it is a 7 mana 6/5 uncommon enchantment creature turtle with flying and ward of 2 generic mana. You can channel it 2 different ways. For a green and 2 generic mana, you can discard it to return target card from your graveyard to your hand, or you can pay a blue and a generic mana and discard it to return target creature to its owner's hand. This thing was sick and great, and I loved it, and it was great early, and it was great late, and it's a hell of a turtle, and look at that image. It's amazing.
I like it. In my heart, I feel like it can do both.
Yeah.
It's like an enchantment. So like it lives in the sea, but can fly. So I think that is a fair game here. I like that it is sort of a signpost for the channel ability in the set that it's in. And it tied it all together nicely. And it's surprisingly good, which a lot of people just kind of saw the mana cost and was like, no, thank you. But no, it's actually great.
Yeah. This card is maybe the only multicolored card that I'll pick first in the entire set. Maybe there's a rare I'm forgetting, but I love a colossal sky turtle. I love a turtle. Like, I'm a sucker for a turtle. It is a sky turtle, but I agree with the argument that it's like a duck. It can swim, it can fly, it can do all the things. Yeah. I'm on board. And I love this card so much that I can't say no. I can't say no to that adorable face and that shell.
Like, once I played this card with the, there's an instant, for God's sake, it's an instant that returns an enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. Oh, the shenanigans. It was just wild. I loved it. And if you're lucky enough to get 2 of them, oh my God. Yeah. Whew, that card is nuts.
I was briefly playing a Cyclone Summoner deck for fun, turtle control, where you would play, you'd attack with your Sky Turtle, play a Cyclone Summoner to return your Sky Turtle to your hand, and then you could use it like a spell, which was great.
Which was insane. All right, let's move on here to number 5. Now, of all the creatures and all the land, someone out there chose the same number 5.
I did. I chose the same number 5.
All right, so before we get to our same number 5, Nerd Girl, what's your number 5?
All right. Now, my number 5 is another card that originally, when the set first came out, it was very underrated because of the mana cost, but proved to be quite good. With the exception of, like, it just wasn't in the best deck in the format for limited, but in every other deck, it was awesome. And I just like it. I love the flavor of it, and it kind of ties together the archetype very nicely. And that is Archipelagore. This is a 7 mana, 5 colorless blue for a Leviathan creature with mutate 6. When this creature mutates, tap up to X target creatures, where X is the number of times this creature has mutated. Those creatures do not untap during their controller's untap step, and it's a 7/7. So you can just put this on your little dirtily guy, tap down their blocker and attack. And sometimes you can just continue to do that. And when you mutate this onto a thing, you draw cards, you get to do some stuff. And it was an absolutely beautiful top end.
It was crazy. This format, Ikoria was just off the chain. Ikoria was like a mini cube. Like the cards were sick. Look at this damn thing. It's a 6 mana, basically 7/7. You're tapping down their best stuff for a whole extra turn. Like it was bananas. And this card is good, but isn't like the craziest interaction you're going to see in Ikoria, which there were many. Like, I think it also just goes to show how nuts this limited format was. Like, it was nuts.
I love Archipelago. This was pretty much the only card that if I saw this card, then I would go into the Mutate deck. If I didn't see this card specifically, I would not go into the Mutate deck. This card won games kind of by itself. It made the entire Mutate thing work. You could tap X, start with 1, go to 2, then tap their entire team for the rest of the game. It itself was a 7/7. The Kev Walker comic book art for it is insane. Like Pacific Rim, eat your heart out. And it was a really cool card.
Yeah, I mean, and just imagine, again, you got that mutate ability every time you mutated it. Like, it was like, normally you just needed the 1, but if, God forbid, you needed it one more time, like, that's game over. It's just insane. That card was fantastic. Speaking of fantastic cards, is our number 5. Ruben, tell us about it, and I'll go ahead and say afterwards.
Sure. So our number 5 is a card that I feel like snuck up on people. I feel like people didn't really get what was going on, and I was among them. I was among the people who didn't really understand what was going on. And then I was at attendance at Pro Tour Fate Reforged, which, if I recall, was not a standard Pro Tour. It was I think it was a modern Pro Tour. Right. This was at the Opryland or the one of those weird convention hall centers just outside of DC. And I'm walking around the site watching people play Magic, and I walk up behind Patrick Chapin playing Modern, and he plays this card in Modern, and I'm like, this card is draft chaff from Fate Reforged. What are you doing? Until I watched the rest of the game, and turns out no one could ever beat a Gurmag Angler. Turns out no one can ever beat a Gurmag Angler in their entire lives. It just beats the crap out of you.
It even made its way all the way back to Legacy, as I recall, for a hot minute. Gurmag Angler is a black and 6 generic mana, so 7 mana for a 5/5 common zombie fish. But of course, it's not really 7 mana because it has Delve. Each card you exile from your graveyard while casting the spell pays for 1 generic mana. So if you exile 6 cards, 1 mana gets you a 5/5, and that's usually big enough to beat anyone to death in 4 turns. So.
This was on my short list. I had a knee-jerk reaction to put this on, but then I kind of looked at it and I was like, I think he's in a swamp.
Sure.
So I decided to nix it for that reason. But if I had thought it was in an ocean, I think this would have been one of the picks that got onto all 3 of our lists.
Yeah, this to me was definitely the fish part is what sold it for me in terms of the sea creature. Not necessarily that it was in the sea. It's also dead for that matter. So there's that.
The angler part in particular was what I think fixed it for me as well. Like it very clearly isn't in the ocean or a lake or a huge body of water of any kind.
Right.
But it is a 5/5, so the biosphere that it exists in has to be large enough to be able to support it, which signals to me that
whale
it
carcass.
Probably right, exactly. It can eat whale carcasses. I mean, it eats 4/4s. So, it can eat moat piranhas and
look at that butt.
Other stuff. Yeah.
Place so big. All right, let's move on here to number 4. Mine is higher on somebody else's list. My last higher, thankfully. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4 is kind of a cop-out, but I think it needed to be somewhere on someone's list. We've talked about this card so many times on so many lists. It had to be here. And I put it at number 4 because I didn't want it to be at number 1, or number 1 or number 2, because I felt like it needed to have its ego dropped a little bit, because we always put it at the highest for whenever we talk about this card. But it is an 0/4 to start with. So my number 4 is Thing in the Ice.
The Thing in the Ice.
Thing in the Ice is an 0/4 defender for a colorless and a blue. It is a horror creature with Defender that enters the battlefield with 4 ice counters on it. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, remove an ice counter from Thing in the Ice. If it has no ice counters on it, you transform it into the Awoken Horror, which is, after all, a Kraken horror. And when it transforms, into Awoken Horror, return all non-horror creatures to their owner's hands, very demonstrably destroying several pirate ships far out to sea because they brought the frozen thing in the ice too far down towards the warm weather of the coast, and that was a stupid idea.
Very flavorful card. I was actually, when I saw this card doing like set reviews, I was kind of surprised it saw as much constructed play as it did. I thought it was going to be a little too slow, but this I think kind of surprised a lot of people, and it was really fun to play and super interesting to see a lot of these type of mechanics in the set.
You know, it's easy looking back to say that, you know, this thing is clearly awesome and it's super playable and now it's a $20 rare from the set and yada, yada, yada. But no one really liked it or respected it much when it first came out. And no one really said this thing's going to define modern or whatever. It was like, it's fine. And then I think the magic was it's, you know, cheap to cast to start with, but that 04, that 4 toughness specifically, can't bolt it, can't easily tack through it in the early turns, gives you that breathing room that you need in the decks that this is going to run in to actually do something cool. And that's what made it neat. And so I didn't have it on my list because I didn't want it because the front side is a horror. And I was like,
right,
my own weird restrictions. I'm like, and if Ruben doesn't care, he'll be on his list anyway. So.
Well, the front side's a horror. So I guess Thing in the Ice didn't make my list, but
Right.
Awoken Horror
did.
made my list.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes I'll be like, oh yeah, Delver of Secrets is a terrible card. Insectile Aberration is great.
Yeah, I put
situation.
Delver in my insect list for the like a similar reason.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nerd Girl, what's number 4?
All right, number 4 is a personal favorite of mine, which I was hoping would see some more play than it ended up seeing, at least in Standard. I don't think it's found a home in any older Eternal formats, but it's a beautiful card. It's super awesome. It does everything I want the color to do, and that's Sea Dasher Octopus.
My number 9.
For a colorless blue, you get an octopus creature that is a 2/2. You can mutate it for 2, meaning put it onto any non-human creature, and then it says it has flash, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, which seems amazing. You can flash it in, make your creature bigger, you can draw cards unexpectedly, and it just is a decent rate on its own, but it didn't really find a home, and it makes me sad.
Yeah. I would have thought that this would have found a home somewhere. Being able to cast it at instant speed is huge. You know, we have Acquisition Octopus, but we also have in the past had other 2/2s for 3 that when they deal damage, you draw a card.
Right.
Traditionally Ophidians see play.
It's a blue thing. Yeah.
It depends on the set. But you know, back in the day, the original Ophidian was a 1/3 for 3 that didn't even deal combat damage. You replaced the combat damage with a draw, and we were happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
It was surprising that this was leave your counterspell mana up, no counterspell. All right, cool. Here's an octopus. Or my 1/1 unblockable creature is now getting through. Here's a free card draw for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is one of those, you know, the format was just ridiculous. Like the set was insane. The format was ridiculous. Like I want to live in the world where this is standard playable. This is tier 2, maybe even tier 1, depending on what weirdness is going on there. But like that was not the world for it. This was the companions were going completely insane. Fires of Invention was nuts. Like all of the stupid 7 mana ultimatum decks were just insane. And I tried to make this work, I assure you. And I absolutely adored the comic book style special edition version of it, or showcase version, which was amazing. It just wasn't good enough, not for the time. And that just broke my heart a little bit. But it was my number
When
9.
I saw this spoiled, I did try to contact the artist to see if they had the original still, and it was already sold. I was heartbroken. I don't own any original Magic art, but this is the first one I reached out to an artist about. That's how much I like this art. So
yeah,
good.
the art market has gotten a lot more options these days with everything, basically every rare getting a showcase version, you know, of some sort. So a lot of options. All right, let's move on here to number 3. And of all the cards in all the world, I have chosen the same number 3 as Nerd Girl. Fun. That's cool. So Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card so this one is another one where it's like the art doesn't have it in the ocean, but I'm pretty sure it can go wherever it wants. It just happens to be ethereal foraging through the sky in the art for Ethereal Forager. It is an extremely potent and powerful magic card, and is also both adorable and sort of Lovecrafty and frightening. Like the more you look at it, the more you're like, oh, not cute. Ethereal Forager is 4 generic blue for a 3/3 elemental whale with flying and delve. Whenever Ethereal Forager attacks, you may return an instant or sorcery card exiled with Ethereal Forager to its owner's hand. This came into a lot of love in the blue-red Delver decks, in Legacy in particular, as a sort of pseudo card advantage.
And this is the kind of weird card that you see get really popular because it's playable in that old format, and that old format doesn't really hit paper these days because hardly anyone plays Legacy or Vintage. But look at that Tix. It's almost $9 on Magic Online.
The art is insane.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right? Like, it has like almost extra legs, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's quite dope.
Every time I look at the art, I'm like, this is my first time seeing the art. Every time I look at the art, I'm like, I don't remember the art looking like this. Like, I'm having a fever dream every time.
Like, it almost has like propeller blade fin things going on in the back. Like, I don't know what's happening, but it's super cool and neat, and it's very, very powerful. Speaking of powerful, crazy cards, for our number 3, Nerd Girl, tell us about our number 3.
Our number 3 is
Bananas.
It's partly a horror, and I think that was well named. They could have just left off that half of the creature type, but because it is seen in people's nightmares every single day, I feel like that was very well named. This is a monster in Standard, and oftentimes when it's just played, it ends the game. I can't think of too many cards that you see played against you, and if you don't answer it that turn, you don't win. And this whole Breaker Horror.
Yeah, I think I've won one game where this resolved and they untapped. Like, it is just almost impossible. Like, they were pretty much out of cards at that point. That was my only way to get out of it. Hullbreaker Horror also got a redesign for, I guess, Historic these days, or Alchemy if you want to play that format. But Hullbreaker Horror is a 7 mana, 2 blue, 5 generic mana, 7/8, a rare from Innistrad Crimson Vow, a rare Kraken Horror. It has Flash. The spell can't be countered. And whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. As much as I love this card, I hate this card. It's wonderful to play with, and it's unbelievably miserable to play against.
Yeah, I'm really glad that a Kraken, a sea animal, got some spotlight to be insanely powerful and very playable. But yeah, this is overboard. I am not a huge fan of controlled decks in general, and this is the staple that everybody loves. And I love its art, but I don't really love what it does.
God.
This was my number 6, by the way, so we're on all 3 lists. Obviously, this card is unbelievably ridiculous. I do like it when Wizards prints big blue finishers that end games. Mm-hmm. This one, in some way, shape, or form, was built different so that it wasn't as fun or interesting to play with or against, really. But it was better, demonstrably, than a lot of those big, stupid blue finishers that we've had in the past.
Yeah, and this is, secretly an 8-mana card. Like, you need to keep up that Fading Hope just in case. But otherwise, you're just going to crush them, and it's going to be sick. All right, let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2, one of its creature types says to me that it spends 90% of its life in the water. And I would have liked for its ability to... I would have liked for it to not have flying until its ability was used, because it is a salamander. And then it doesn't gain flying until you pay the adapt cost. But here we are. We live in a world where Terramander is a 1/1 flyer, and then you pay 7 generic and a blue to adapt for 4, but the ability costs 1 less to activate for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. And very often that adapt cost was 3, maybe 2, sometimes 1, depending on how long the game went on. An amazing first turn play. one of the best things to put a Curious Obsession on, as you can ask Autumn Burchett, who won a world championship won a
Pro
players
Tour.
championship thanks to that.
Right.
An extremely powerful creature, a very cool card from Guilds of Ravnica. No, wrong. Ravnica Allegiance.
Yeah, my number 10. This card's great.
Nice.
Yeah, this card is ultimately like it's a flying man at its base, and I think sort of, I think flavorfully you could say it would gain the flying after you adapt it, but I think just for sort of constructed reasons, honestly, just competitive reasons, they just let it have flying.
Yeah, it's fine.
Doesn't hurt much.
Very good, and nothing was broken by it, but it was always top tier. It was always kind of in the tier 1 decks of the formats.
Yeah, it didn't take long. All right. We'll here to Nerd Girls number 2. What you got?
Number 2 is a card that I'm sure has got to be on someone's list. It's got to be someone's higher here. It is a massive creature that, still got to see some play as a sweet finisher, which is interesting. But one of the things I like the most about it is that there's no way we can go to Kaldheim and get a Norse theme without having Jormungr. That's what it is. The world serpent, which is just absolutely well done here with Cosmos Serpent. It still looks like it's in the ocean, even though it says Cosmos, but I think that's just because it's so big. But we have a 3-mana green, blue for a legendary creature serpent. This spell can't be countered. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 3/3 blue serpent creature token. Name Koma's Coil. Sacrifice another serpent. Choose one. Tap target permanent. Its activated abilities can't be activated this turn. Or Koma Serpent gains indestructible until end of turn. This is kind of insane, and that's exactly what I would expect from the Midgard Serpent, which is going to be a very iconic piece of Norse mythology.
Yeah, it's my number 4. This was me. I had fun with this card because there's ways that, like, yes, you need some instant speed removal to deal with it, but sometimes you can sneak them in to get it in on the stack and then you kill it or whatever. Like, there's a whole bunch of ways you can at least play around a Coma to some degree where the whole breaker of the game is just over for your 7-mana finishers. But this was my number 4. I really enjoy it. I like reanimating this card is great. I like ramping to this card is great. And yeah, I've had a ton of fun with this card.
Yeah, card's very good. I always dread seeing it. This is another of those cards. It's like you have to kill it before they make a token. And if you don't, the game just ends. But I like that. I like cards that do that. I like cards that end games. And this one, I mean, it ends games. Well, it's very good. But I've beaten it. Even if it's made a token or two.
Yeah, I've had that experience where they've made a token and I've won that game. It's kind of unlikely. It wasn't easy. But you can get there.
I've won very few limited games. There's been plenty of games where I was like, I win no matter what, unless they have Coma. Yeah. And then they would play it and I would just cry.
Yep. And then like once out of every 5 games like that, I would have the removal spell, but most of the time I'd just lose. Speaking of cards that are super crazy good, I just have a feeling, that Wizards didn't really pay a ton of attention. They paid a ton of attention and they got the numbers wrong, or they didn't pay enough attention and the numbers are wrong, because Kappa Cannoneer is a hell of a turtle. And yeah, I also think it lives in water too, because whatever, it's a turtle. Okay?
For sure.
It's a sea creature, is a turtle, because damn, and it's also a Blastoise, is that right?
Blastoise.
Blastoise from Pokemon.
That's
because
right.
I'll be damned. Kappa Cannoneer is just a bananas monster card. This thing is already $7-8 out of the Neon Dynasty Commander set. It is super duper powerful. I don't even see a ticket's price right now. My God, it must be insane. Wizards literally had to go in and say, we're upping the amount of Kappa Cannoneers we're putting in treasure chests because it was just getting bananas. The last price I saw was like 50 tickets or something crazy. Kappa Cannoneer is a blue and 5 generic mana, but you never pay in that because it has improvise, meaning your artifacts can help cast this spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activated mana abilities pays for 1 generic mana. It is a 4/4 artifact creature turtle warrior. So there's the warrior deck, there's the turtle deck, it goes in artifact creature decks, the artifact things deck. It has ward of 4 generic mana, for God's sake. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, You put a +1/+1 counter on Kappa Cannoneer, and it can't be blocked this turn. What? This card is bananas. This card is ridiculous with the amount of treasures, with the amount of blood tokens, like all this crazy stuff. This is why they're talking about, playing this in those older formats, because damn, this thing is sick.
Yeah, if you have ways to cheat this into play really early with cheap things like treasure and blood tokens, which are meant to be like one-time uses, right? That's why their power level is held back a little bit. But if you're using them to cast this thing with Ward 4, your opponent's not going to be able to remove it for 5 turns, because it's going to take, in order to kill a 6/6, they're going to need some mana to do that. And then you have to pay the additional 4. They'll be long dead by that time.
Yeah. So this card was also specifically seeing play in just regular old affinity, right? Because improvise is essentially affinity. In a lot of ways. So if you just go Memnite, Ornithopter, Artifact Land, some other crap, then turn 2, play a Cannoneer, turn 3, play the rest of the crap in your hand, attack for 10. Like, here we go.
It's just crazy.
Yep. It's going to attack for a lot. And like the art on it with like the big cannon on the back is very fitting for how big this thing is when it's going to hit you.
Yeah.
It's going to blow
Holy
you
smokes.
For sure.
Yeah.
Ward 4 is a ridiculous number. And you're also completely safe of this being a sea animal, because the kappas in Japanese and Kamigawa folklore inhabit like rivers and streams and lakes and stuff. So,
nice.
Even though this guy's in a forest,
right?
Definitely water dwelling.
They're like the numbers, like maybe one more in the mana cost. Maybe it doesn't get a counter, it just gets +1/+1 to end the turn. Maybe the ward's a little bit smaller. I don't know what it is, but it's been a minute since I read a creature like this and going, damn, they made a mistake. Like, that was not what they were meant to do, was to make one of the best new legacy, vintage, whatever finishers. No. All right, let's move on here to number 1. And I share my number 1, I'm guessing, with Nerd Girl. Yeet.
Don't act like you know me.
Wow. I know, Ren. Wow, how dare I, first of all. Ruben, tell us about your number 1.
My number 1 was always going to be my number 1, and thank goodness it was always going to be my number 1, because this creature was not in the list that Evan shared with us beforehand.
Oh, no.
Because, this is the go-to.
I know what
comes into play creature. This is the creature. It's won Pro Tours. It's been in cubes forever. It's been replicated, but never truly overtaken. My number 1 is Mana War.
This was my number 10.
Nice.
It's the one that started it all. It's the first time we had this sort of ability on the creature that did the thing. It was very powerful. And every time we see this mechanic, we just call it a Mana War, right? We see this mechanic all the time on like little wizards or ninjas. And they're always great. And they're all just Mana Wars for a reason. It's sort of like a bear.
Yeah.
It's iconic.
It is.
So
and they just
2
won't
generic
reprint
and
the thing. Go ahead.
2 generic and a blue gets you a 2/2, originally from Visions, reprinted a number of times, currently in the list. And when it comes into play, return target creature to its owner's hand. New players are always a little bit sad when they have to return it to its owner's hand on an empty board or against a shroud creature. But other than that, it's the tempo play to end all tempo plays. It gives you a board presence. It blinks.
We
it
didn't
blocks,
know.
It does
Look,
all the things.
When I was cracking Visions packs, as you do, and the rocks were soft, we had no idea how good or bad these things were. Like, we knew Necrotol was great. Like, that's obv. But Mana War was like, it's fine. It's whatever. They never, correct me if I'm wrong, they never put this creature back into standard. They gave it the one time. You get one time in Visions. I think they finally did make a creature with the same stats of 3 mana 2/2 into the battlefield to return a creature, but I think that's also a May ability, again, because you don't have to return it if there's Shroud or if it's the only creature on the board. So yeah, Mana War is in that weird, it's the old design talk, the old design where you have to do something. And it was also, game changing at the time. We were like, whoa, this creature is like a spell. It's a creature, what's going on? And then like every creature does everything. But you got to start somewhere. And speaking of starting somewhere, this was my number 1 from the start. I'll be honest, I should have had Mana War on my list, and I feel bad about it, but I don't feel bad about sharing my number 1 with Nerd Girl, because she also must recognize how super awesome and sweet this card is. It's absolutely adorable. It's just a $40 uncommon foil, for God's sake. A almost $6 uncommon, which they just won't hardly reprint ever. Nerd Girl, what is our number one?
Our number one is Hedron Crab,
We
the
did
one
it.
crab to rule them all.
We did it.
He is beautiful. Hedron Crab is a 1 blue mana for an 0/2 crab creature with landfall that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard.
Mhm.
This has been sort of reprinted a little bit with like Rune Crab. We're seeing like kind of a similar idea here, and they're always great and they're always fun. My first deck I ever purchased cards for as a small child was a mill deck. And yeah, this is a part of that, and I love everything about it. I love that it's a crab, and I like beating people with mill. So this is my spirit crab.
My God, $40 foil. I can't believe it.
What a crazy powerful card to just kind of be out of nowhere.
You know, for people to just not. Well, again, for one is that it just seems weird they have problems reprinting it, which is odd. But you know, I'll take an expensive, silly, uncommon crab. It's
Sure.
great though. The image is sweet, and like the crab's like holding the hedron, like, you know, it's very cool, very cool.
And
Can you tell me why it's so expensive with Rune Crab? Like in, more recently reprinted.
Yeah.
Like I feel like Rune Crab's just better, right?
people love mill. People love anything that mills.
I agreed, I do too.
Right.
But I just meant like you said that they're having troubles reprinting it, but they gave us Rune Crab, which is just a better version.
well,
Right, but it's not
sort
the
of.
same.
Well, it's also target player. Rune Crab is only your opponent.
Ooh.
Can't
So,
mill yourself.
You can't
Doesn't
mill
matter.
yourself. Even
Are
though it
people
has a
hedron crabbing milling themselves
They
mostly?
are.
That's why it's driving up the price.
in
I assumed it was
vintage,
always
they
in
are.
mill strategies.
Right.
In vintage, they're milling themselves. In dredge, in particular.
Okay.
But in vintage and modern, it's self milling in addition to milling your opponents. Both are very good, but the option of the two is worth the extra toughness.
Right.
Gotcha.
And casually, like, mill is just money. Like,
Yeah, it just wins.
like
I know.
I think it's Glimpse
Yeah,
the
we know.
Unthinkable. I mean, you literally said the first deck you bought, am I right? So like that is a truism. All right. That said, that was our top 10 sea creature cards. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben.
Never going in the ocean again.
Never again. We're done.
This list has terrified me.
The 017 is just too much.
That the king crab,
King crab.
like the
Evan, don't lie. You like booty. Don't lie.
It's true.
I got 5 kids. All right, so we go to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AlterSleeves.com, my co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.